Nigeria, there are still many there. There are many. I believe that those people, they said they are deep.
When you begin to hide yourself
of the business I'm doing, how to keep business, like customer business, receipts.
Hello and welcome to the program. I am Oyi Adekunle. Now, West African states are now beginning to look inwards with the view of solving their own problems. And by that, I mean the issue of irregular migration, which has in recent years been given the sub-region a controversial global reputation. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, is now developing initiatives to increase job creation to address the menace. This decision was reached at a meeting of a joint committee of ECOWAS in Conakry, Guinea. ECOWAS Parliament Speaker Mustafa Siselo called on members of the committees to ensure that they come up with recommendations aimed at boosting job creation. He said this would be done through promoting the development of small and medium enterprises. Let's now come home to Nigeria, where more often than not, issues are being raised about how porous the country's borders are and how it has resulted in unrestrained inflow of migrants into the country. This gets even more serious when we begin to link it to the rising cases of insecurity and crime across the country. Now, the federal government has resolved to get even more decisive on the matter by ensuring safety and transparency across borders. The government is set to launch an electronic border solution in the 86 border posts across the country to combat cross-border criminality. Take a listen to the Minister of Interior, Abdurrahman Dambazao, provide details on this plan.
Borders are very porous and diverse. It is impossible to man these borders physically. And therefore, there was the need to have modern technology to be able to monitor our borders. But not only that, too, we also thought of the capacity to respond to emergencies at the borders. But as you know that the Nigerian Immigration Service is the vanguard of border security and management. And of course, it does that in conjunction with other security agencies like the customs and even the military. So it is on this note that we presented a memo today for this e-border solution. This process started sometime since 2012, but we picked it up and to move forward when we came in. The process is supposed to be completed within the next 2 years. It will cost about 52 billion naira. There is a pilot project already, which has been very successful, which has been installed to monitor 2 borders. This project is going to cover 86 border posts in the country, and also will be able to monitor those illegal routes which we have identified as about 1,400 of them. We'll be able to monitor those illegal routes that are used for smuggling and all kinds of cross-border criminal activities.
Also, the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP, is collaborating with the United Kingdom Aid and Department for International Development, DFID, to launch a new campaign aimed at reducing the number of overseas sex trafficking victims from Edo and Delta states. According to the Director General of NAPTIP, Julie Okadonli, the Not for Sale initiative provides women in both states with the support services that enables them to seek out training and opportunities in Nigeria. Well, it's good to see from all these how much concrete steps have been taken to address this issue, which has now become a major challenge nationwide. But we'll go on a short break now, and after that, the conversation will continue with the boss of NAPTIP herself. Please don't go away. Now joining me on the program is the Director General of the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP, Julie Okadonli. Many thanks for joining the program.
Thank you for having me.
First, let me begin by asking you on taking you on some of the recent projects or partnerships that NAPTIP has got into. There's this one with Niger Republic, and there's also this partnership with UKAID, that's the Not for Sale initiative, which is to take place in Edo and Delta State. So can you please just brief us on what these programs are about?
Thank you very much. The Niger one is very strategic in the sense that Niger and Nigeria share a very common border. And so there's a lot of entry and exit on the part of Nigerians and Nigerians alike. So that partnership is extremely important. There's so much human trafficking going on across borders both ways. And so it's very important and necessary that we partner with Niger. We're about to sign an MOU to fine-tune other areas of what the partnership would spell out. On the part of the UKAID, I'm Not for Sale, is a communication strategy, a kind of awareness campaign for the young boys and girls, men and women, to know that they are priceless and they are not for sale, because the human traffickers see them as objects, they see them as merchandise, and so it's just a kind of slogan that makes them to have confidence in themselves, to rebuild the confidence they've lost. Because we found out that most of traffic victims are people who have very low self-esteem. And so this is a kind of, trying to boost their morals and make them know that, yeah, there are better options for them in Nigeria and should not be seen as a commodity to be sold or bought by anyone.
And speaking of security along the border lines, the federal government has talked about introducing technology to secure the border. So would you think this is a right step? Speaking of the technology aspect now.
Absolutely. Technology and manpower are two different things. I mean, we've gone beyond just having physical beings to man borders. I mean, we're in the technology age, and so, yeah, you can't rule out technology. Technology is extremely important, and that's a very good and welcome one.
So are your officials trained would they be trained to take part in this particular initiative or program?
Will who be trained, please?
Would they be trained once we introduce technology, looking at it that we've tried, let me use the word manual now, and then we still have the issues. So speaking of technology now, would you think that we're trained for that?
Everyone requires some form of training or the other. I mean, even you in the media, I'm sure if new equipments are brought, you will have to be trained to know how to manage those equipment. So, yeah, it's just a natural thing that goes with introducing new technology. All those who are going to be manning the equipment are definitely going to be trained and retrained. Training is not a one-off thing. It's something that is continuous because, I mean, with time, these equipment may become obsolete, and so new equipment will be introduced, from time to time. So training is part of working, yeah.
Recently, you called on the military for their cooperation in fighting human trafficking. Considering the amount of work that you have been doing in trying to stem this scourge, at a time like this, one would have wondered that military would have been with you in the course of time since from the very get-go. So why is it now? Is it that there's been no form of partnership between NAPTIP and the military from before now?
The military is a very specialized arm of security. They are not the usual kind of security apparatus like the Nigerian police, the customs, and so on. They are very, very highly specialized. So they are not just someone you just go partnering with when it comes to some certain issues. Yes, for human trafficking now, we have a peculiar situation in the sense that the last trafficking in persons report that was released, Nigeria did not fare very well because the military were implicated in one or two areas. And so, yes, it's very important we partner with the military to see how to step up those areas where they are found wanting. Of course, the military has consistently denied the allegations because they remain mere allegations until they are proved. But be that as it may, I decided to have a meeting with them to see how, if it is true, they helped, you know, to discourage child soldiers. Child soldiers now are not soldiers, children who carry weapons. Child soldiers are also defined as children who are found around a war zone, either running errands, like buying food, buying water, fetching water, and all of that. Those were the allegations. And so I thought it was necessary to discuss these allegations with the military to see how, for them to look into it very closely, if indeed it was happening.
And another aspect of partnership I would like to look at is the recent call you also made for ECOWAS states. And I'm trying to bring that, juxtapose that with the announcement or the alarm you also raised again about Nigeria, the planned xenophobic attacks against Nigerians in Mali. Looking at our neighbors now, would you say that from your experience so far, have they been helping situations?
Well, you know, human trafficking is a global problem. It's not just a European problem. It's also huge in West Africa. And, you know, it's all charity should always begin from your home. And so we're looking at ways to tidy up the surrounding African countries around us to ensure that we stop human trafficking, and as well as also trying to stop human trafficking in Europe and the rest of the world, in the Middle East and the rest of the world as well. So we are just taking everything together without overlooking any particular country or region. We talked about an impending xenophobic attack. There are no xenophobic attacks right now, but it is very imminent in the sense that the Malian girls are beginning to see the Nigerian victims as a threat to them, in the sense that they claim that the Nigerian victims of forced prostitution are taking away their men from them because their men seem to like the Nigerian girls. Unfortunately, they do not even understand that these are victims who are forced into prostitution, not because they are prostituting deliberately or they like what they are doing. And so I'm saying that we need to try to rescue these girls as fast as possible before they are the mercy of these Malian girls, in addition to the traffickers and the customers.
And on the home front about scaling up awareness, you said that there are some areas that are endemic and you'll be scaling up awareness in those areas. Many people want to say that as much as you do a lot of work, the awareness, you may not necessarily be doing it in the right places, because we look at places where they don't have access to internet, for instance. These are places, these are people that we should be talking to. But most of the time when we do awareness, we take them to urban areas, people who most likely have the means to even travel if they want to. Or do you understand what I'm saying? So what would you say about that?
I would say whoever says that is absolutely wrong. Our awareness usually are in the rural areas. Of course, we cannot neglect the urban areas just because we want to concentrate on the rural areas. Like I said before, we do not just ignore or take for granted that the fact that people are in the urban areas, they are literate enough to understand the ills and consequences of human trafficking. It's really interesting to know that even in these urban areas you're referring to, there are still a lot of ignorant people, people who are even graduates, people who have jobs, who abandoned their jobs and traveled out of Nigeria and found themselves in a trafficking situation and have been calling on NAPTIP to rescue them. We have so many cases like that. So the fact that we also carry out sensitization in the urban areas does not mean that we neglect the rural areas. We cannot cover the whole of the rural areas. And that is why I keep saying that, you know, the fight against human trafficking is a fight that should involve the whole of society and the whole of government. You and I have a role to play. Each and every one of us has a role to play. We need to go back to our various communities to educate and enlighten everyone that is there. Everyone has a role to play. The media has a role to play. Every single person has a role to play. So it's not just a job for the federal government of Nigeria.
You said we all have a role to play, and that will lead me to my next question. And as it were, we have just transitioned into a new government, if we can put it like that. And in the build-up to the elections, many people were talking about the things that they wanted government to do. When they were doing campaigns, people would talk about the plans that government had. But in most of these campaigns or town hall meetings, we didn't have people specifically talk about the plans of government for stemming irregular migration and human trafficking. So where are we? Where is that line? Where are we lacking? What is it that we're supposed to be doing that we're not doing? Or is it that people just overlook this thing as it's not really happening because it has not affected them personally?
I didn't get the last bit of your question at all.
Like I'm saying now that what exactly are we missing here? Is it are people overlooking the situation because it maybe has not affected them personally?
Maybe because what?
It has not affected them personally.
Well, I really don't know. Sometimes, you know, people see things and they don't see things, they don't say anything. Sometimes people just think that it can't happen to me. You know, when you even try to talk to them about it, they say, no, it can't happen to me. It's not my portion and all of that. Some people are in denial. Some people just really don't care. And that's just the way it is. Those that should, you know, talk about it sometimes don't even say anything about it. It's just like teaching your children on sex education. Some parents are shy to even speak to their children about that. And they think it can never happen to their children until something bad happens to them. And even when things like that happen, they don't even report it. They hush the children and they tell them not to mention it anywhere, you know, because they are scared of stigma. So a lot of people, yeah, are scared of stigma. They are scared of what people think, what people say. So we need to, you know, that's why everywhere we go, we need to tell people to learn to speak up and not to be ashamed of anything. There's nothing new under the sun. We'll do ourselves a lot better when we speak about this than keeping quiet about it and being in denial. I think that is the first step, is to talk about it and keep talking about it. The government has been talking about this, so it's not something that has a tenure. It's not something that the first 4 years they talked about it and the next 4 years they are silent. It's something that the federal government has the political will to fight. And that's the most important thing. And we will fight it. We are fighting it and we will continue to fight it.
Some months ago, you raised awareness about emerging trends, and you mentioned orphanages being the area of focus for some of these human traffickers. Could you please reiterate and just let people know what's happening in that area?
Yes, now we have a lot of orphanage trafficking. People just pick children up from anywhere, and the next thing they set up an orphanage. And the question is, those children couldn't have fallen from the sky. When you see children wandering, the first thing that should come to your mind is this is a missing person. And then you try as much as possible as a good Nigerian citizen to look for the parents of this child and not to take the child into your home and then it now becomes a permanent visitor or guest in your home. And that's what a lot of orphanages are doing. Will you also believe that there's so many orphanages who have children that were kidnapped and kept in the orphanage home? Because people now see orphanages as a place where children, you know, orphans are being helped, and they come with money, they come with clothing, they come with provisions, and then some of these fake orphanage homes have taken advantage of it. They take food, they take money from unsuspecting Nigerians who think that they are helping, whereas they are promoting kidnapping and all sorts of evil things. Some of them even sell children from the orphanages. Yes, that's not within my mandate, but true, we have to work with those whose mandate it is and ensure that children are not taken advantage of in the orphanages, especially the fake ones that are not registered. Even the ones that are registered, we have to be sure that they fall in line with the practices, the best practices.
I would like to know, in a situation where you apprehend people who you convict people, what exactly do you do to them?
Oh yeah, when we arrest offenders, they are prosecuted and they end up in jail. So far, we have about 397 convictions and we have a lot of cases in courts. lots of prosecutions all over Nigeria as we speak. We prosecute the cases. We don't just make noise about it or arrest. We're a law enforcement agency. We have the powers to arrest, the powers to prosecute. We have the powers to seize, to confiscate, to freeze assets. We have very large powers. I can tell you that NAPTIP is a very special organization in the sense that we don't just arrest traffickers, we also rehabilitate, rescue victims. So we have, we take care of everyone.
All right, there's the United Nations Voluntary Trust Fund for victims of human trafficking. Has Nigeria keyed into this particular initiative?
We haven't benefited from this, but we also have the Victims of Trafficking Trust Fund. Is a Nigerian trust fund which we plan to expand and make the best use of. But right now we just have compensations that are paid to victims. But with this trust fund that we're going to we're going to start taking advantage of now, we'll make sure that it is well funded and the victims benefit from it.
And so where will the monies be made from? Would you be confiscating things owned by persons that you have successfully convicted? Or what would that be?
Monies for the trust fund can come from anyone. It can come from private persons. It can come from government. Can also put in some monies. And most importantly, it comes from assets that have been confiscated and accounts that have been frozen of convicts of human trafficking.
About 3 months back, on the 65th chartered flight of stranded Nigerians from Libya, the UN IOM did say that there are about over 63,000 Nigerians still stranded in Libya. And considering the crisis in the country right now, what would you say is the fate of Nigerians that are still stranded over there?
Well, unfortunately, Libya is a very volatile region, and I feel my heart goes out to those that are stranded. But the truth is that the federal government has not stopped repatriating Nigerians that are stranded in Libya through the help of the IOM. It's a continuous exercise. I don't think the federal government has ever stopped repatriating stranded Nigerians in Libya. They keep coming, at least almost every week. We have 2 to 3 planes bringing back stranded Nigerians. So it's an ongoing process. It's a work in progress. It's not a one-off exercise. They are still bringing them back, those that are accessible. There are areas that are not accessible. I can't speak for the areas that are not accessible. But for areas that are accessible, they are bringing them back. And they will come back.
So for this period where the crisis is currently in the heat of the crisis, has there been any form of communication between the IOM in Libya and NAPTIP or other agencies trying to work around this situation in Nigeria?
Well, I'm sure the IOM is working closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Nigerian Embassy in Libya, and of course NEMA. So I'm not sure we really have a role to play in terms of repatriating stranded victims. We usually have a role to play when it comes to victims of trafficking. So when they come back, then the NAPTIP staff are on ground to receive them and to profile them, just to sieve out victims of trafficking, if any.
And it's sad that as much as more people are being brought back, people still embark on journeys outside the country on a daily basis. So what would your advice be to Nigerians now concerning this human trafficking?
Well, my advice to Nigerians, there's nothing wrong with migrating, but if you must migrate, it should be in a safe and regular manner. When people start advising you to travel in an irregular manner through the Sahara Desert and through the Mediterranean Sea, then you should know that all is not well and all can never be well.
Of course, there are also people who do not go through the Saharan Desert. And they are being trafficked.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Whether you go through the Sahara Desert or you go through the airports, if you're going for an irregular visit, for example, if you have a visa that takes you abroad, for any country abroad, just for a holiday, for a visit, and then you decide to stay back and start looking for a job, then you are an irregular migrant because you do not have the qualification or the status to remain in such a country. And so you're a victim. You're a potential victim of trafficking. You're definitely going to be trafficked. because you're stranded, you don't have anything to do, you don't have a job to do, and then people just approach you and tell you, you know what, I can get a job for you. You become desperate and you become a victim. You become a potential victim for trafficking or any other bad thing, for that matter, that can happen to anyone who is irregular.
Thank you very much, madam, for your time. The DG of NAPTIP, Julie Okadonli. Well, that's it on this episode of the program. Remember, you can watch it again by logging onto our website at www.tv360nigeria.com. You can also watch it on YouTube at TV360 Nigeria, on Facebook, we're TV360 Online. Till I see you again next time. Bye-bye.